Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Payback Club from Stan Kadonsky and Half Kingdom Games. Payback Club is a 2 to 4 player game of building up your character, completing jobs and assignments, and trying to stay just enough under the radar, assuming you want to that is, until you can build up enough points before game end is triggered. This is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change. I'll have links to the crowdfunding campaign down below, and the channel is sponsored by Allplay, more about them at the end of the video. In Payback Club, you're going to have your specific characters. I have Alice and Lionel over here set up, and you're going to be trying to complete various jobs that will go into your little lower board area over here, where it's going to augment the points you get for all the various things you're going to be doing. I realize it's a little not necessarily clear, but the general idea is you have a selection of jobs. Completing those jobs will help you score points. So let's kind of work your way through a sample turn so you get a sense of what's going on. I think that's the easiest way to see how this game plays. So we're going to start our turn by taking a movement action. So for example, if I'm playing as Alice over here, Alice has 1 movement by default, all characters do, but then you possibly have extra movement if you have a vehicle. So she currently has 2 movement. She also has this job in her hand that she's trying to complete, which means she's going to need to get her hands on 2 green cards. She already has those, and 1 vehicle, which she also already has. So she's primed to go ahead and complete this job. This job can be completed either at these 2 locations, so she can go to Party Row over here, or alternatively, she can go to the Factory Zone over here, and fortunately, she's within 2 of the Factory Zone. So the first thing she's going to do on her turn is she's going to move 1 and 2, heading to the Factory Zone over here, where now she can take 2 actions. Your general cycle of a turn is you're going to move up to your movement speed, and then take 2 actions from the available list of actions. The first one is going to be the one we're focusing on right now. We're going to go ahead and complete a job. It's one of the slightly more complicated actions in the game, but we already have all the things we need to do it, so you can see how this plays out right now before we start building up for other things. So right now, we can go ahead and take our 2 green cards over here and our vehicle, and we can give those in order to complete this job, which is then going to be tucked under our board in this column over here. That tells you which column is going in. You have 3 different columns on your player boards, each of which will augment your points for different aspects you're going to be doing throughout the game. We're also going to get 4 money and 2 points. So for example, we're going to go ahead and grab $4 from the supply. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is particularly helpful because this card actually helps us for the money we've accumulated in the game. And then we're going to get 2 points. We're green over here, so we're going to bump up over there to 21 points before tucking it onto our player board. The way that works is each of these player board slots is going to be augmented based on the number of jobs you've completed in that category. This particular one is at the end of the game, you're going to get 1 point for every $10 you have, plus an additional point for every $10 you have for each job you have tucked under here. So if you lean into certain things, if you lean into a bunch of jobs that reward you for having money stashed, you're going to want to try to stash as much money as you possibly can during the game. That's one of the actions. The other actions you can take a location action. Unfortunately, we are currently in a location that does not have a location action, so we can't do that. We could possibly play a contact card. There's going to be these contact cards you can get from here, and you can play those to the effect. In our case over here, we're going to look over here. We're a little low on items. We already discarded our vehicle, so we're going to pay $1 to take a random item. We're going to pay $1, and we're going to take a random item from the selection of items. That's going to help us prep for our next job. We have a secure phone. You can also take actions on items themselves, which you can see from this item we drew over here. And then because we had an encounter, we're going to shuffle it to the bottom of the deck over here, and we have new encounter for the next player. So again, just a quick recap. We moved 2 spaces because we had a vehicle that allowed us to do so. Then we took 2 actions. We completed a job, and we took an encounter action. And then you end your turn by placing a little bit of your heat over here onto the board, marking that you've been in this location, and this location is attracting a bit more attention. I have it set up for a 2-player game, which means the last 2 slots are always filled with random non-in-player markers that are not being used by existing players. That's a turn cycle. Move, complete 2 actions, and then place your alarm token onto the board to signify that the game is getting a little heated up and there's a little more attention in those areas that you have you've been working in. That's a turn. Let's go ahead and take a turn with Lionel over here. Now Lionel's working his way towards his own objective card over here. He's trying to work on these rigged elections, which he would need 2 blue cards and a purple, which we already have in our hand. We have these 2 blues and a purple right now, but this is a mission that allows you to do extra things to get extra rewards. If he gets his hand on 1 more blue card, he can go ahead and do both these sides, getting the rewards on both, and that's going to give him an additional contact card. That's particularly helpful because he's working his way towards trying to power up his contact actions. This one is going to give you 1 point for each different contact you've played at the end of the game, plus an additional point for each different contact for each mission you have in this category, which he already has one, and this would be another. So he's trying to accomplish the redirections, and he specifically wants that extra contact card because it's going to help him power up the point scoring, which means he needs a blue item in order to do so. So he's going to go ahead and wander over to the safe house using his one movement. He only has one movement, he does not have a vehicle, and that means he's going to go ahead and take another mission from the display. I won't overthink this because I'm trying not to do too much right now. And then he's going to take an item card, and he could pay for one of those, but none of those are blue, so he's going to take from the face up top of the deck over here. This card is unfortunately not going to be a blue card, which means he didn't get the blue card he wanted. He's still hunting that down, but he has to think through a second action, and this one actually, this action over here on the card, we can show you this, is he can go ahead and draw a contact card. So we're going to use that to draw a contact card, and that's going to help him get more contacts that he can use to be able to power up his scoring. He's still hunting for his blue card, but he took his movement action, and he took two actions. He took a location action, which you got to see in action, and he played an action card to get the ability on that action card. That's the basic cycle. Oh, let's go ahead. Let's not forget to take a heat and put it onto the board, an alarm token. That's the basic cycle of the main ways your turns are going to go through. I'll show you the other things we get to shortly, but the basic idea is on your turn, you're going to take two actions. I actually forgot to do one thing, by the way. When Alice went ahead and completed her mission, you're actually supposed to complete the job token, moving it up, which will put another one of these special goals on the board. We'll talk more about those soon. Before we get into those, just a quick reminder of the cycle of play. On your turn, you move up to your movement speed. You take two actions, the possible actions you can take, which I've done most of them at this point, but you can go ahead and resolve a location effect. You saw us do that. You can complete a job at your location. She specifically had to be at that location in order to do that job. You can resolve one action item, which you saw us do. You can play a contact card. You did not see us do that, but a contact card allows you to play the card and taking the effect on it before tucking it into your played contacts area. Then you can take a special action, which often is going to be your own character. Lionel has an ongoing action, but Alice has a special action she can do, where she can give items to characters in your location in order to put markers onto these spots powering up your tableau. That's going to be, oh, and then resolving an encounter, which you saw me do over here. That's the encounter deck, which you can either simply gain $1 or do any of these three actions, and if you do, you tuck it onto the bottom before having another encounter for the next player. That's going to be your turn cycle, and then you place an alarm out. Other things that can happen in the game that you have not seen. So first of all, there's going to be we have the encounter cards, we have injury cards, which can happen if you take too many injuries, which you can see how that goes with either if you walk into areas with thugs, there's a way you can take injuries, or when you have showdowns, which is what happens when you end up placing your alarms in zones that are already full. So in other words, let's say we had an alarm token over here. Let's put this on the board. And then if we had, let's put it over here for right now. If Lionel were to end his zone over here, he would take his alarm token and place it on the last spot. Whenever a zone is full, you put it onto the last spot, and whenever you put a token onto the last spot, you're going to trigger a showdown, which is going to have you drawing cards with the various strength values from that deck and having them weigh up against two cards. I'm not going through the full details of it. The basic idea is you have another player who's going to be drawing cards from the showdown deck. Those have strengths as well as actions. Then you can use your own items, which also have strengths and possibly have showdown actions on them as well, and you see who wins. If you win, you get a showdown marker from this board over here, and if you lose, you unfortunately take an injury. Well, you take you lose a health, which can result in you taking an injury card. And then over here, we also have special items and special vehicles. Those are more powerful vehicles and items than the basic stock you have. And then we have these goals over here, which these are going to come out as you move the job token up the board. These goals give players something to work towards. For example, the jeweler that's already on the board over here, if you have 14 money, you can place one of your markers onto it in order to get the 9 points at the end of the game. And others can still get points, but they get less points. They have to go to the jeweler's location and first come, first serve. So working your way towards those goals. That's the basic idea of the game. You're basically trying to gather points through a variety of means. And one of the main ways to do that is going to be jobs. You're also going to get end game points from these various goals. You can see the difference in color between, orange points, which are in-game, and purple, which are end-game. There's a lot of other things that can do. Lots of these will give you ways to get points. Items can give you ways to get points. There's lots of things, contacts. There's all these different ways to get points in the game. But the main thing that's going to drive your behavior is the combination of trying to be mindful of the jobs you're taking while also trying to stay under the radar, usually. I say usually because there are perks to actually engaging in showdowns. This column over here is going to reward you for completed showdowns you've done successfully. So right now, we can see Lionel already has one completed showdown, which is worth 1 point, but it's worth an additional point for every job you have in this column. So you could lean heavily into a mode of play where you're just encouraged to go ahead and attack others, well, not really attack others, to engage in having the game attack you if you believe you have the items to withstand that, because you'll actually get rewarded for doing so as opposed to staying under the radar. That's also helpful because as you place your markers onto the board, eventually you can take something which we haven't shown you yet, but you can basically take a hideout turn. Hideout turns are where you're going to go ahead and get rewards for all the tokens you've placed out. So you can see you get more and more rewards the longer you've stayed in play. If you manage to stay under the radar for a full 6 turns, you'll even get a bonus 3 points at the end of it, and you also get to power up your character with these traits. Traits is something you're going to get at the beginning of the game. You can either get them randomly or draft them, but they give you these ways. They don't give you something you have right away. They give you something you have access to buying when you take a hideout turn. You can pay into one of these traits and get an ongoing ability that's going to help you in the game. That is 95% of what you can expect to encounter in Payback Club. You're basically wandering around the board, accomplishing jobs, trying to get points while being mindful of which particular way you're leaning into in order to get the most points as you try to stay ahead of the other players. With that, we can go ahead and dive into a review of what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like. And in general, I like the mission point scoring. I believe this is something, I haven't played Resurgence in a while, but I believe this is something that Stan Kudowski did in Resurgence, that idea that you lean into these certain areas that are going to maximize your points as you accomplish these missions. But in general, that aspect, because you are trying to work your way towards something, and some of that's going to be more intentional, some of those less so. With Lionel, for example, he already benefits from showdowns because that's going to help him fill up his own tableau, powering him up, getting more strength on cards, getting more item cards, things like that. And so he's already leaning into that because of his character. So it is in his best interest to collect these high value cards, that 10 and that 9, going to be very helpful in showdowns, and then just say, hey, let the law find me. Let the enemy gangs find me. I don't really care. I'll deal with it because I'll get rewarded for doing so. And then I'll also go ahead and accomplish a bunch of missions that will give me more points for each showdown token that I have. And so that's going to be leaning into your own strengths depending on your traits, your character's ability, or your preferred playstyle. But I really like when games let you lean into things as opposed to being like, oh, everything's evenly spread. No, I can be better at this thing. I can get 5 points for a showdown. You're only getting 1, so you're working towards your own different thing. And again, there are different things. Your contact cards, your money, or your showdowns. And that's also going to tie into the goals you have. So for example, we have these goals. So if for example, Alice is trying to lean into those money over here, trying to build up her money scoring, that's also going to help because she has a bunch of money. She can go over here to Tech Valley. In fact, she should be the one who actually has enough money right now to go ahead and place this out, getting a bonus 9 points at the end of the game, while also stashing for her endgame scoring over here. Meanwhile, Lionel's paying attention to this guy, trying to get him out, and these don't have to be in order, by the way. Whoever causes the token to move past is the one who'll take it and put it onto the board into a location, and then you can go ahead and say, look, I have 3 showdown tokens, I'm going to go ahead and be the first person to get 9 points for that. So I really like the way the game leans into maximizing your points for things and the different ways it's all going to come together between the character abilities, between the items, and between the goals to try to figure out your pathway towards scoring. That aspect of how long you can last on the board is another nice little touch as far as trying to figure out your own strategy. There's reasons to take a hideout turn early, trying to get a trait out early that can help you out. Those traits come in a variety of different ways. They'll help you accomplish jobs. If you can get a trait out that accomplishes jobs early on, you can start getting those jobs faster. Granted, when you take a hideout turn, you might only get 2 or 3 bonuses as opposed to somebody else who might be able to stay on the board for 6 full turns and get a whole bunch of stuff when they take back, plus being mindful of that wasted hideout turn. So there's a lot of trying to min-max what you do, whether that thing is staying out or whether that thing is taking hideout turns early. There's a nice little puzzle trying to figure out there as well. I like the asymmetric characters. I don't find that they are heavily overwhelming. I mean, I wouldn't mind more stuff that makes them asymmetric, but there's a nice small little puzzle as far as what each character is doing. Alice over here is trying to share cards. Lionel over here is trying to engage in showdowns. Each one is going to give you something that you're trying to do to both build up your tableau and give you a little mini goal as you go. And speaking of cards, the multi-use cards is another fun thing. The fact that the cards are being constantly traded in for the missions themselves. Sometimes giving you multiple icons, which can be incredibly helpful, but then also giving you actions you can take as well, or even engaging in showdowns being useful for that. So there's a lot of reason to be mindful of those cards. As far as things I don't like in the game, a few small things. First of all, the theme doesn't do it for me. In general, this kind of gangster theme, just not something that pulls me in. I'm not against it, but I just don't care for this thematic type of game experience. Outside of that, I'll say that more mechanically speaking, I don't love some of the wastage that happens in this game. Players are playing with a hand limit that can be buffed up in a few small ways, but generally that's not going to, for example, a vehicle over here. There's also ways to buff it up on your personal tableau board, but until you do those things, you are often working with a degree degree of wasting cards, trying to gather cards, and you either have to pay for them on the display, and sometimes those cards aren't available. It's worth noting, there is a location that lets you pay to cycle those cards, but you can't always get the cards you want. Sometimes you're going in blind, and sometimes you just have an overabundance of things, and you have to go out and discard cards that aren't helpful. I don't love that. The same thing happens, I think more annoyingly, it happens with vehicles, where you have a vehicle, you can only actually have one vehicle at a time, which makes sense, but then very often you'll get things that give you extra vehicles as rewards or whatnot, and then if you have a vehicle, it just feels like a waste. So like the times you have to discard items or vehicles and not get anything back for them, I don't find the game gives you as many tools to be mindful of avoiding that wastage, and so when it does happen, it's slightly frustrating. I also found the encounter system to be a little underwhelming. This encounter system over here, while I frequently do use it because it can be helpful for that extra action, because of the sequence of play, you can't, take an action, move, take an action, you're moving and then an action, so very often you're either doing a job or benefiting from the location's ability. That's very commonly one of the main things you're doing, so job or location ability. But then the other thing you do is going to be possibly an action from your hand, possibly your own character action, but I find more often than not it's going to be an encounter, and encounters can be either simply gaining $1, which is underwhelming, but hey, it works, it does the job, or alternatively it's an encounter with a player, or the smuggler, or the fence, which thematically makes me think I'm actually having an encounter with a person at my location, but at least from every reading of the rules that I've been able to interpret, it doesn't seem to be that way. Worth noting, prototype rules, check pin comments for any thing I got wrong, any of that stuff, but in general, it's like you can have a player encounter regardless of whether a player is at your space right now. I can say, hey, by the way, Alice, I know you're here. I'm over here. I'm doing the player encounter. I'm going to give you an item to draw a contact. It doesn't require having a person there, and that's same with the smuggler and the fence. They're terminologies that make me think that there's a smuggler and a fence, but there isn't. They're just 3 options you can do in general, regardless of any person at that zone. And I'm not advocating you should have a person in the zone, because that's a different aspect to juggle, and gameplay-wise, mechanically it works. Thematically, I find it to be very weird. It's like, here's this extra action that's an encounter, but it's not actually an encounter. I was a little thrown off by that as I played. As far as I can see, others not liking, the showdowns in general could be something you don't love. It's a weird balance in the game where it's like you have somebody else drawing cards from the deck over there and then trying to work their way as best as possible against you. They're trying to say, oh, this card's going to be an 11 strength and this card's going to move a thug there, which is going to make your life harder. Whatever it is, they're trying to figure out the best way to annoy you as they play those cards, and you can either play cards from your hands if you have them, and if you don't have them, you can even top deck cards and hoping for the best. But the showdown system, it's not super punishing. Taking an injury is not the end of the world, but it can be something where you feel like you don't always have the tools to deal with the showdowns. It didn't bother me because it depends on how you play. Some games I leaned into it, like with Lionel over here, for example, and you lean into trying to win the showdowns. In other, I reconcile the fact that the showdowns feel punishing, but they're actually not super punishing to lose. It's a mild irritation. You can even heal yourself at the hospital, things like that. So I wasn't super bothered by it, but it could be less of a feel-good moment if you're not embracing into how they work. Again, whether you're trying to beat them or just not caring as far as the outcome. I'll also say the speed at which items can leave your hand can be a little throwing off. Like, there's a lot of things going on in these cards. You're like, ooh, I have this 10 strength card with 2 symbols and an action, but you're only really engaging with a few of those things at any given point, especially if you're engaging with showdowns. So a lot of information on these cards, they kind of just flow through your hands relatively quickly, not being able to take full advantage of them. As far as final thoughts on Payback Club, I overall enjoyed the game. There's a lot of fun things going on as far as the tableau building. I think the thing that threw me off the most of it is how quickly vehicles kind of come into your supply and then quickly leave your supply. I feel like there's a better system to be had. Like the item wastage, fine. There's a lot of hand management. I'm okay with that. The theme, again, I'm not super into the theme, but I don't mind it. I've played the games with mob themes before, and they don't super bother me. They just don't necessarily pull me in. I think the encounter system and the vehicles constantly leaving your hand were small little irritations as far as, I don't know, they just weren't necessarily they didn't feel as smooth and cohesive as I would have liked, given how well everything else works. But there is a fun system of building up your tableau, working with the character, trying to find your own competitive advantage, leading into the goals and the missions, as you try to, again, stay under the radar or not, depending on how you are playing the game. Overall, I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. I definitely enjoyed the system, with some small irritations and quirks. As far as other game recommendations, if you are here for the theme, definitely check out Scarface 1920 for another game that's going to have very different mechanics going on, but some degree of small overlap. But hey, if you like mobsters and you like cards and you like all those fun things happening, check out Scarface 1920. And I mentioned at the beginning of this review, at the beginning of the review, but Resurgence from Stan Kronowski himself, from the same designer, I felt it was the most similar of his other games. Lots of differences. Lots of things are very different between the two game systems, but that one definitely felt like it had some degree of overlap as far as the board locations, the mission selection, things like that. So if you enjoyed one, you may well enjoy the other. And then I mentioned at the beginning of the video that Allplay is a channel sponsor. If you go to allplay.com, you can find a variety of games, both from Allplay as well as their partner publishers. And if you're in the US, it's $4 flat rate shipping for anything combined from, well, any of them. And definitely check out Quo Vadis if you're looking for another game. Different theme, very different theme, very different mechanics, but if you just like the trying to get one over onto the players, trying to be very mindful of the screwage that can happen, check out Quo Vadis for a game that is surprisingly simple and surprisingly mean at the same time. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.